It's so great to be back with you again. It's been a long time, and I have my hair growing out, but oh well, we're going to do this video anyway. And today I want to show you how to do this poppy quilt. You can do it on a pieced background. Here's an example of a much larger quilt that I made with a pieced background. I'm going to show you how to do it on a plain background, and then if you already know how to do a pieced background or a collage background, you can do that on your own. So I'm just going to show you the most simple version right now, and that is on this plain background of a gradation fabric. So we'll be printing out a diagram of how to do all the pieces for the poppy, how to cut them out, how to draw them, trace them, and you'll be making your own poppy quilt in no time. This quilt is not finished yet. It is in progress. I have not stitched anything down. I have not done any of the quilting, but in this video I'm just going to show you how to applique them with MistyFuse onto the background. And then in the next video I will show you all about the shading and the stitching and the quilting. And so let's get started right away. This is the background fabric that I'm using for the quilt. It's just a simple gradient from Vicki Welsh. I will put a link to her website down below so that you can order fabric from her. It's gorgeous. This is the top part of the fabric that I cut off. And so you can see that the gradient goes actually from this deep green to a lighter green to an olive to a yellow, orange, and all the way down to this darker red down here. It's really gorgeous. So this is, I believe, the maple sugar gradient. But I'm just going to use this part of it for now. You can pick whatever fabric you like for your background. I think green is kind of nice because it suggests the foliage that the flowers are growing in. When you print out your pattern on your printer, you're going to get a guide. This is not to scale. So this guide is just to show you how you're going to arrange your flowers and foliage on your background. And all the pieces are numbered here. That is followed by poppy number 1, page number 1, poppy number 2, and poppy number 3. So these are to scale. One thing I want to say about these patterns, I am not a pattern drafter. I don't make patterns, and these are very crude. So they're not professionally made at all. I just did them with my nice little Sharpie pen, and in my Photoshop I did a little bit of touching up and then printed them out for you. But I numbered all the pieces, and one thing I want to say is you might want to extend all the stems down a little farther. So when you're cutting out the pieces, make the stems a little bit longer. Some of these I already drew them a little longer, but you can see how on this guide the stems stop right here because that's where my picture stopped. And if you want to have a little more flexibility in where you place your flowers, you will have more flexibility if you make your stems longer. You can always cut them off, but once they're cut, you can't make them longer again. I guess you could splice two pieces together, but you want to avoid that. Then the next thing you want to do is choose at least 4 different colors of red or orange for your poppies. And they can be subtly contrasting or vividly contrasting, whatever you like. Okay, so here are some examples of different kinds of reds and oranges. Then you also need 2 colors of green, I think would be all you need. So then the first thing we do before we cut out these flowers is to put MistyFuse on the back. I use MistyFuse so much that I get it by the bolt. And you can see right here it says MistyFuse inside the bolt. You can get it in small envelopes for around $10. And you can get it from MistyFuse.com. I'll put a link to that as well. You can also check other quilt shop websites to find it. We need to put MistyFuse on the back of all our fabric before we cut out the flowers. That's the easiest way to do it. So let me show you how we're going to do that. You first need 2 pieces of parchment paper. Okay, one for the bottom to protect your ironing surface, and one to go on the top to protect your iron. So let's say we are going to put MistyFuse on one side of this fabric. I'm going to cut a piece of MistyFuse. This is just a cheap paper scissors that I'm using to cut this. Okay, so it's fine if it goes generously over the edges of your piece of fabric, but you could trim a little bit off and use what you trim off on another piece that you're adding MistyFuse to. Okay, so if your fabric has a right or wrong side, the right side is going to go down. You are adding MistyFuse to the wrong side of the fabric. So lay your fabric down, lay your MistyFuse on top of that, then lay your parchment paper on top of that. Oh, I think I needed a little bit bigger piece of parchment, but there we go. I usually set my iron to not be on steam, and you just iron over that and you'll be able to see that it's working. You can see this kind of webbing coming through when it melts. Okay, get it all melted, and then you need to let it cool off. You can kind of wave it around. Just wait a while. You need to wait a couple of minutes until it's cooled off before you try to peel this off. What's going to happen if you peel it off too soon, some of the MistyFuse will stick to your parchment paper and you won't be able to use it again. I like to use this parchment paper for quite a while before I throw it away. It works for a long time. Do not get dollar store parchment paper. It will not work. It will stick to your fabric and you won't be able to get it off. Make sure that you get a good quality of parchment paper. And I like good old Reynolds parchment paper. That works for me. Once this has completely cooled, then you can peel the parchment off and just take a corner and just make sure that you've got all that MistyFuse. You know, you can feel it. If it's truly cooled off, you shouldn't have any problem getting it off. But do check. Little bits of it sometimes tend to cling. Okay, and then it will look like that. And this is your MistyFuse side. You can see the webbing on it. And then this is the nice top side. Now, once your pieces of fabric all have MistyFuse on the back, you can set them aside. You need to get your freezer paper. So it looks like Reynolds is my brand of choice here. It doesn't have to be Reynolds, but just get a good brand of parchment paper and a good brand of freezer paper. So you have your guide with all the numbers. This shows you how you're going to arrange everything. But now that you want to cut the pieces of your petals out and your leaves, this is how you are going to do it. So take a piece of freezer paper. All right, so there's a dull side and a shiny side to your freezer paper. You want to cut these out with the shiny side up. So take your Sharpie marker, and you're going to cut each one of these pieces out, but you can draw all of them. You can see through, and these do not have to be exact at all. I used a very fat marker when I was drawing these petals, so you might want to go kind of tend toward the outside of them. Okay, so just trace them onto your freezer paper. Mark your numbers. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. And that must be 5. Okay, now your stem is going to be very, very skinny. Okay, this is the fattest one right here with that goes with the biggest flower. And just continue it down, make it a little longer. Okay, and then label 24 with your little arrow. And then let's fit this on here. Yeah, okay, that'll work. Okay, I just want to show you how I'm tracing one of these papers. Okay, and then the stem, make it nice and long. Just keep it going. Go a little longer. You can always cut it off. 23. This one was 18. And there's one little stem here. Don't miss this one. Okay, one little stem right there. And that is number 22. 22. Okay. So then when you have that done, you are going to cut out each leaf and each petal separately, like separate all of them out. So you're going to cut your leaf like that. You're going to cut your stem. And you can do this with the rotary cutter as well. You don't have to do it with the scissors. You can do it with a rotary cutter. In fact, most of us are so used to using a rotary cutter that we can do that a lot faster. Okay, and one thing to make sure of, once you cut your stem out, you need to label it right on the stem so you know which one it is. And even better yet, label it on the back. 23. Okay, because the back is what's going to show. You might want to transfer all your numbers eventually to the back once you get these cut out. Okay, so I have my leaf number 18 cut out there. Flip it over and label it. Okay, and then you're going to cut each piece out the same way. Flip it over, put the label number on the back. Okay, so do that with all your pieces, and then I'll show you how we're going to iron them to the fabric. All right, so I cut out all the pieces of this poppy and this leaf, the stems, and I have MistyFuse on the back of my green fabric. Okay, and I laid out all the pieces I cut out for the leaves for this. The stems, I have the 2 stems here, 23 and 24, and this little tiny 22. Don't forget that one. That's this little guy right here. Okay, so the shiny side is down. We are not going to cut a seam allowance around these pieces like you would sometimes. This is going to be raw edge applique. So they can be very close together. They can be super close together. You don't have to waste any fabric. And just put them all nice and close. and then put your parchment paper over that. This time when you iron, you are not going to leave your iron on there very long at all. You just want it long enough to make that freezer paper stick. Okay, so I'm just ironing it down, boom, like that. That's it. Okay? Then you're going to cut these pieces out. And for this, I am going to use a little scissors. See that little number 22 there is wanting to come loose already. So let's cut him out first and just go right along the edge. Be a little generous because maybe you want the stem a little fatter than what I gave it, the size that I gave it. There's your 22. And to be honest, these pieces are so tiny that I would keep them in a little Ziploc bag. I would get a little Ziploc bag and just cut each one of those out and put it safely in the bag. Okay, you can't see what I'm doing here. So I'm just cutting right up near the edge of the freezer paper. And don't take the freezer paper off, just let it stay right there. So you're going to cut each one out. If you had that iron on there a lot longer, this freezer paper would stick to the fabric and you wouldn't be able to get it off. I've had that happen already. These are great little scissors. They are Karen K. Buckley scissors. They come, I think, in 3 different sizes. I think this is the middle-sized one. The edges of the scissors are serrated, so they're really perfect for applique work. I'm not cutting the paper out with these scissors, I'm just cutting the fabric. Okay, so anyway, you can see what I'm doing here. And I'm going to continue cutting all these pieces out, and you can do the same with your pattern. And I'll meet you back here when we assemble everything together. All right, I just want to talk about a couple things to do with choosing fabrics for these flowers. If you look at this flower, you have to kind of think about what petals are going to get the lighter colors and which petals are going to get the darker colors. These 2 petals, number 2 and number 5, are probably going to be a bit darker because they're a little bit on the underside of the flower. 3 is going to be your lightest color because it is the most up-facing petal. It's going to get the most light. And number 1 is also kind of out there. It's flopping out, and so it's going to reflect more light as well. 4 could also be a little bit light. So that is what I chose here. Number 3 is really light. Number 1 is a little lighter. My 4 and 5 are pretty much the same, and then the number 2 is pretty dark. So what I did, I cut these out of freezer paper like I showed you before. The shiny side, you have to sometimes feel it to figure out. The shiny side is going to go down on your little piece of fabric. The fabric is there with the MistyFuse on the back side of the fabric, but the back side with the MistyFuse is facing up. Okay? So these are all ready to go. These, you know what you can do? You can just touch the, you don't want to put your iron flat on this surface, but just touch it a little so it sticks because they're really curling. Okay, just touch it down a little bit. Trying to make sure these are both the correct side of the freezer paper. Okay, and then I'm just going to do that quick little ironing. There they are. And then cut these out. Just like I did the leaves. Okay, so I'm going to cut these out just like I did the leaf. and then I will show you how to arrange them onto the quilt. Now you're going to lay your pieces out on your background fabric. You have your guide here. So it's just going to be approximate. There's no way to get it perfectly like the guide, but you might have your own way of arranging these that make it look better to you. You're going to notice that I changed my leaf colors. They were just too blah. They were dull and they weren't vibrant enough. So I changed to this color. I still have the backs on all of these, so I know kind of where they go. And you're going to take the backing off and just start arranging things the way you think they should go. So I have all mine approximately in the right spot. And I'm just going to start taking the backs off, and make sure that you're laying it down with the web, the MistyFuse side down. If you don't, you're going to get a lot of gunk on your iron. Also, as you arrange these, you want to leave a little space at the top. You know, most flowers are growing near the ground, and you want to have some space up there. You don't want to have your top flower be right up against the top of the quilt. So start arranging things, and hopefully your freezer paper is going to come off nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and arrange this, and I'll come back when it's all ready to go. Okay, so I've got my arrangement all pretty much done. I just have it tacked down really lightly with a very tip of the iron. So you're going to notice that the freezer paper gets, when you start taking it off, it makes the fabric pieces very full of static, and they're going to cling. The paper's going to cling to your fingers. But just, you know, give it a shake. And you just want to take the tip of your iron and just kind of tack things down lightly, because you might want to rearrange them. You don't want to press everything until you're absolutely sure it's the way you want it. Another thing to keep in mind, the far away petals are going to go on first, and then the closer petals are going to go on top of that. So here, these back petals that are far away from the viewer are the ones that you fuse down first, okay? And then you put these on top of them. They're just overlapped a tiny bit. And here, I think these I didn't get on yet. So you can see here, I did these two petals first, and then this is on top of it, and it's good to go. So I am going to go ahead and just press that down. Okay. I think everything's pretty good. Now, one more thing I want to talk about. This stem, you know what? I got that down a little too low. I think I can get it off. Yeah. Okay. It's got to go up a little higher in there. There we go. And then move that over that way. Okay, so it looks like this leaf is coming out of that stem. So see what I mean? There's little adjustments that you have to make. All right, and then let me pull this up, get the bottoms of these stems down on, and you can see they go down. This one isn't going down quite far enough, but that'll get caught in the seam allowance and it'll be fine. And then you'll just trim these stems off. Okay. Now, one more thing I want to talk about. This is a really large poppy, and you're going to think, that looks really odd. It doesn't look natural at all. It's such a light petal right there. But this is where you're going to put this stamen. You're going to sew in there with your thread and create the stamen of that flower, and you're going to do shading with your thread as well, or with paint or whatever you like to use. And I will be showing you how to do that later in the next video. So don't worry about this being such a big petal and that it's so light and so different from everything else. It will be fine. If you prefer to make it a little darker, that is absolutely fine. So you can see we have lots of shades of green. Up here I used a darker shade for this little bud, and then I went lighter because the fabric down here is getting darker. So I'm mindful of the contrast with the background fabric. Okay, so this is pretty much all we're going to do right now for this video today. And I'm going to trim it up, and then in the next video I'll start showing you different techniques for stitching down these applique flowers and how to do the shading and how to make them really pop. So see you back here for the next video.